Hello, and welcome to Badger Talks Live, which brings exciting happenings, resources, and talent from your UW flagship campus to the people of Wisconsin and beyond. I am Sabine LaLiberte, a rising senior studying psychology and global health. I'm originally from Manitowoc, Wisconsin. During the month of June, Badger Talks Live is proud to showcase the latest UW research and information in support of Alzheimer's and Brain Health Awareness Month. I'm pleased to introduce the network manager of the Dementia Diagnostic Clinic, Jody Craner. Today, Jody will be looking at risk factors and warning signs of burnout for those caring for a family member living with dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. In addition, she will be discussing strategies to minimize caregiver burnout. Jody is a licensed clinical social worker who practiced at a large medical and behavioral health care system in Waukesha for 20 years. She has also advanced education and experience in business and worked as an administrator in a large community-based nonprofit in inner-city Milwaukee for 6 years. Jody joined the Wisconsin Alzheimer's Institute at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health in 2016 as the Dementia Diagnostic Clinic Network Manager. She earned her bachelor's in social work from UW-Whitewater and her MBA and master's in social work from the UW-Milwaukee. Jody will be answering questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to post them in the chat at any point. Please welcome Jody Craner.
Thank you for the wonderful invitation to be here today and the introduction. This is one of my favorite topics to present on. I have no financial relationships that I need to disclose. We're going to be talking about defining who a caregiver is and the possible impact that caregiving for a family member living with Alzheimer's disease due to dementia could potentially have on the individual. We're going to look at the risk factors and warning signs of caregiver burnout, and then wrap it up with strategies to minimize the risk of caregiver burnout. I found this quote early in my career. It's from Rosalind Carter, a former First Lady. From her perspective, there are 4 kinds of people in the world: those that have been caregivers, those who currently are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. Hence, we will all be touched by caregiving in some fashion over our lifespan. So who is a caregiver? A caregiver, care partner, or carer, or another term you prefer, is an individual, paid or unpaid, who provides any type of assistance to another person who is ill, disabled, elderly, or needs help. Such assistance could be helping with shopping, organizing bills, preparing meals, helping with personal care, laundry, housekeeping, or taking to a doctor's appointments. For the caregiver role, or for family members and friends, this role tends to evolve very naturally. With the individual not recognizing they are a caregiver, it becomes very organic dynamic within the relationship, and they don't identify themselves as a caregiver, the additional role, and so then don't have insight to the fact that they will also need some support. Caregiving for family members have gone up over the years, and this is from 2020. The family members now caring for a loved one living with dementia has also gone up. Caregivers express that sometimes their health is impacted by it, or finances are. About 61% of family caregivers work outside the home. They tend to be the boomers, the Gen X, and the millennials providing the care, and about 61% are women. The physical and mental health effects that can happen with family caregiving are usually associated with the following factors. For caregivers experiencing greater degrees of depression and stress and lower ratings of subjective well-being, often it's related to gender, where females tend to be more affected. Caregiver age, where older caregivers tend to be more affected. The relationship between the caregiver and the care recipient can also have an impact, with the spousal relationship having a bigger impact. And then caregivers that are in the lower socioeconomic status. Other factors linked to greater degrees of depression and stress and lower readings of subjective well-being are associated with the caregiver having limited support networks, the duration and amount of care provided, and then the care recipient's cognitive impairments, their functional abilities, and their behavioral problems. I have 3 extremely busy slides coming up, and I'd be happy to share them. And I have a handout format of them or the slides if you'd like them. So bear with us as we go through them. But I do think they're going to help us set the stage for understanding caregiving someone living with Alzheimer's dementia, what that may mean over the course of the disease. The first slide is going to be on the cognitive changes that we see with dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. The cognitive declines going on in the brain will then influence the next slide, which is going to be on functional changes or ability to do everyday activities. And then after that, we'll have one on behavior. They're all 3 slides. These busy slides are all set up in the traditional 3-stage model of the disease, with mild stage being first, then there's going to be moderate, and then severe stage. So early in the disease process for someone living with dementia due to Alzheimer's disease, we see the mild confusion, short-term memory loss, repetition, diminished judgment, attention, problems with new learning, visual spatial issues, problems with problem solving, and then disoriented time, meaning that they're not sure if it's Monday today, or is it Tuesday, or is it Friday? Are we in June, or are we in December? What year is it again? So we start to see this in the early stage. As the disease progresses, many of these symptoms continue to progress with the disease. And then we see additional cognitive or other parts of the brain become involved with the disease process. And so you see additional language changes. Often the person at this in this stage is not quite sure where they are. They may be asking to go home when they're actually in their home, but they may be referencing a childhood home that they want to go to. And then as the disease progresses, we see that they have become cognitively so involved that all aspects of safety and decision-making needs to be addressed by somebody else. There may be a point in time where the individual no longer even recognizes themselves, that if they look in the mirror, they don't realize it's them. So those cognitive changes that we see through the disease course then will impact the ability of the person to do everyday activities. Usually it starts off in what we call instrumental activities, daily living, where they start to struggle with doing their finances, their medication management, and driving. Then it progresses with the next stage into other areas of activity like meal preparation, laundry, telephone use. Then it starts to tap into other personal cares with their ability to do dressing, bathing, toileting. And as the disease progresses into the severe stage, we then see complete dependence on all activities of daily living, and then also potentially swallowing difficulties, and then increased motor involvement. So as you look at these slides, think about what the individual is going to need assistance with, and as a caregiver, what that would mean to that caregiver assisting them. From a behavioral standpoint, in the mild stage, we see the confusion, the hallmark signs of repetitive speech and actions, mood swings, personality changes, diminished ability to plan. Some sleep disturbance starts with person sleeping more or not enough. When they wake up, they're very confused. In the moderate stage, we see, again, many of the symptoms in the mild stage continue to progress, but then we can see additional things like suspiciousness, paranoia, agitation, aggression, sundowning behavior, delusions, hallucination, restlessness, exploring behavior, shadowing, and often we see folks getting into a reversal sleep cycle, very disruptive part of the process. And by the severe stage, we know that they need 24-hour supervision. The last part I want to mention, it's on the slide here, is that we say that if you've interfaced with one person living with Alzheimer's disease due to dementia, you've interfaced with one person living with Alzheimer's disease due to dementia, meaning that we have some predictability what's going to go on with the journey, but we don't know that everybody's going to have all the symptoms and the same course and the same intensity. And so you really have to appreciate that we kind of know what's laid out in the dementia condition, but we have to appreciate the uniqueness of the individual. So looking at these 3 busy slides and understanding the course of the disease and what the person's going to need assistance with, it's easy to see that caregiving for someone living with Alzheimer's dementia that it can be a commitment to time over years. The course of the disease can be anywhere from 5 to 25 years. And so it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Typically, the care receiver requires more and more supervision as the time goes on, and they're less likely to express gratitude for the help they're receiving. Many individuals don't even understand that they need help and deny that they're getting help. The other thing that's very disheartening about being a caregiver for someone living with Alzheimer's dementia is that no matter how much their best effort, how good of care they provide, that their contribution or assistance is not going to change the disease. It's going to continue to progress, and it's not going to stop it. Now, hopefully the therapeutics coming down the line will make a difference, but right now, all they can do is provide the best care, but it's not going to make the disease go away or stop. So what we often see is caregiver burnout. So what is caregiver burnout? It is a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion caused by the prolonged and overwhelming stress of the caregiving role. Here are some signs of caregiver burnout. Sleep issues for the caregiver, being overwhelmed with fatigue, lack energy, weight loss, weight gain, feelings of helplessness, neglecting their own physical, emotional needs, feel like the caregiving role has taken control of their life, becoming impatient, irritable, headaches, stomachs, physical problems, lower resistance to illness, clinical depression, problems with coping with everyday issues, anxiety about the future. So when caregivers reach this caregiver burnout and have these type of symptoms, what can happen? Over my career, I have seen the following type of scenarios evolve where poor decision-making happen, there's discord among the support system, potentially neglect, abuse, physical issues for the caregiver, safety things, isolation happen. And so it's really important to appreciate that the caregiving role can result in this burnout situation. I'm going to go over 3 high-risk scenarios that I have seen in my career that tend to lead to burnout. The first is the nocturnal activity, where the care recipient starts to be up in the all night long, and it starts off very gradually, where during the day they start to take naps because they're unable to initiate things, plan their day. And so the caregiver will take these opportunities of uninterrupted time to do the housekeeping, the laundry, and other things. Eventually, these napping periods of time result in the care recipient not actually needing to sleep at night, so they're up and about. For some caregivers, what they do is they try to mirror the same sleep patterns, trying to nap when their loved one is napping and then stay up at night. This doesn't typically work because it's not a good sleep hygiene, and so they tend to wear out. The other piece is that the rest of the world has continued to operate on the other system. And so the doorbell, the phone, the need to go shopping, and doctor's appointments continue to happen, even though they try to do this reverse role at night. I've seen caregivers try to, secure their loved one in part of the house while they try to sleep at night, only to wake up to the stove being on, maybe the water left on, flooding the lower level, the person leaving the home. And so this is a situation that will burn out a caregiver real fast if they're sleep deprived. And there are very strategic ways to handle this and help the caregiver and the care recipient not get into this or to reverse this. The second scenario is a heroic approach, and I have an example of that. This is a situation where a gentleman came in with his wife. They had a very long-standing traditional marriage. They were in their 80s. She was diagnosed with dementia due to Alzheimer's disease, and then he was very committed to her, loved her, and said he was going to provide all the care, do the best he could. He didn't want his daughter involved in the care. He was just going to take care of things. So he learned how to do simple meals. He learned how to do the wash, the housekeeping. He even learned how to put on her makeup, made sure she wore the clothes that she historically always liked to wear. Over time, this took his toll on him to the point that finally he realized he needed to go to the doctor. He was having significant physical symptoms that he had been ignoring for a period of time. But when he got to the doctor, he found out that he actually had end-stage cancer, and so was hospitalized and died within weeks of the diagnosis. Sadly, his cancer could have been treated if he would have gone in earlier when he first started having symptoms and not ignore them. For him, and knowing him, I'm confident that it would have saddened him even further to know that because he was so heroic and only the person providing the care for his wife, when he went in the hospital and then subsequently died, she went through an extremely transition of distress, because anybody providing care for her did not know her preferences, her patterns, her interests, her routines. And she was so looking for him all the time, didn't know who all these strangers were. And so she's extremely distressed by having no other folks involved in the picture. The third high-risk scenario I find for burnout is the promises that can create tunnel vision. And another case I want to give example to was a woman referred in. She had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and they were looking for treatment recommendations. The Adult Protective Services referred her in with her son. And interviewing her son, he had shared that when she first was diagnosed, she had asked him to promise to never have her move into a nursing home, and he did that. The father was deceased and he was an only child. And so he took it upon himself that he was going to do everything he could to maintain her in her home. And initially, when she was diagnosed, he lived in a different his own home, a couple miles away from her. Over time, he figured out that he could not help her from a distance, so he sold his house and moved in directly with her. At that time, he was working, and so he would come home from work and find that she had left, or she had done some stuff in the house that created some safety issues for herself, and so he had her attend an adult day center. As she moved through the dementia condition, she had the onset of some of the behavior issues, the agitation, the aggression, and eventually the day center said, "We can't handle her, she may not come back." And so she was home. He quit his job to be with her 24/7. And at that point, he would take her out into the community when he had to go like to the doctor's office or the store. And there then became a point where when he took her out, it was just too difficult to deal with her, to keep track of her, and her behavior was too hard to manage in the community. So what he did is he took and minimized the amount of times he had to go out. And so when he would come back again, he would find that she would either have turned on the stove, or there were knives out, or she had left the home. And so what he did is he decided that if he had to go out, he minimized the times he would. What he would do is make sure she had gone to the bathroom, that she had eaten. He turned on a favorite show of hers, had her sit in the chair, her favorite chair, and he tied her there. And then he would go out, do what he had to do, and return as fast as he could. Well, one of these rare incidents when he did this, there was a window next to her chair, and there was a telephone pole and a worker on top of the telephone who had looked into the window and saw her tied to the chair in a highly distressed situation. So he called the police, who then subsequently called Adult Protective Services. So this man presented in for services wife. He says, I did everything I could. I sold my house. I quit my job. I've been with her 24/7, but I still made a decision that wasn't good for her because I didn't know what else to do. And so this is a scenario where he got stuck because he was so focused on this promise that it created tunnel vision. And this is abuse and neglect. And so Adult Protective Services was able to find caregivers to come into the home that were trained in dementia to help him so he could keep her at home. And our physician lead was a psychiatrist, so there were some pharmaceutical interventions that he could also assist. So she did end up staying home in his care with Adult Protective Services, making sure that he had the assistant and the respite he needed. And she did die in her home, so he was able to keep his promise. But ultimately, when caregivers make these promises, they sometimes get tunnel vision on. And so working with caregivers, I would always ask them, have you made promises to your care recipient? And find out if they had or not, and always coach them to try not to make a promise that they were not going to be able to keep, that they don't have a forecast of what their health is going to be like or what their loved one's health like. And I said, if they want you to make a promise, pretty much what they're asking you is that you don't abandon them. And so you can say things like, I really love you very much. I'm going to always do my best to make sure you have everything you need. I will always make sure you have the care you need. I love you. I will never abandon you. And if the caregiver put that kind of message in their own word, it usually was effective and avoided this promise situation that they potentially couldn't keep. I'm including this slide because I wanted to mention that, as we saw on those busy slides, the person's ability to track over time, different things evolve. And the familiar relationships get confusing to an individual living with dementia due to Alzheimer's. At some point, they typically don't realize that the son isn't their husband, or maybe the grandson is their child. They confuse the relationships. They don't understand the relationship. And for many of them, they'll reach a point where they don't even know that their husband is actually their husband and that this is a child. For most caregivers, when this milestone is reached in the process, it's extremely emotionally distressful. And I've seen caregivers, when they've reached this point, all of a sudden make impulsive decisions because they're so distraught. And so saying, what's the point? They don't even know who I am. I might as well have them move. And so they do those things and then later to regret them. And so I would always coach the caregiver prior to this milestone about this and encourage them to defer any decision making until they have had an opportunity to work through this emotional, crushing, distressful situation. And it usually helped a lot with them making more logical decisions that they would support later on. So how do you avoid this caregiver burnout? These are my 7 strategies. The first one, if you get this one, you're going to do well with the other 6. The first one is you have to take care of yourself. So if you're sitting on an airplane and the flight attendant comes in, and they always tell you if you're traveling with somebody who needs assistance, you should put on your mask first, because if you put on theirs first, you may not be breathing to put yours on. And so I attempt to try to get caregivers to realize that they need to take care of themselves. What does that mean? Well, my master's training for social work, there was a theory called Maslow's hierarchy that I really, really appreciated, and kind of it stuck with me. And Maslow had this theory that we all are trying to get up to this self-actualization, meaning we're trying to live our best life. But in order to get there, you have to meet your needs at the lower ends of this pyramid. So in order to live your best life, you need to have air, water, food, shelter, sleep, and such. And once you're able to do that, then you can move up to the safety needs, and then subsequently up to the love and belonging, and continue to ascend up to the pyramid. So this always kind of made sense to me, but it kind of connected into caregiving when I was interfacing with one of the psychotherapists at our clinic. She would use our offices in the nighttime to meet with clients and do counseling with them. And her name was Letice. And Letice had asked me for some basic resources in the community. She was looking for like the clothing closet, food bank, and then resources that would help with energy assistance and such. So I got the list together. I went to Letice and I said, here are the resources you had asked about, but I'm a little perplexed. How come you want these resources? I thought you were doing psychotherapy. And she said, I have a lot of single mothers on my caseload. And so I found when they come in for an appointment and we're trying to talk about the top layers of this pyramid, she said they're preoccupied and distracted because they're not sure if they're going to have enough food for the rest of the week for their children and themselves. And they're not sure if they're going to be able to afford a winter coat this winter because their littlest one outgrew it. Where if I give them a list of resources, they're able to get what they need. And then when they come in, they're able to then work on the top part of this pyramid. And it kind of made sense, doesn't it? If you don't know where your next meal is coming from, you don't have clothing, how do you start looking at meeting some of these higher ones? And so I use this model in working with caregivers, saying, if your self-actualization is providing really good care for your family member, you need to take care of yourself. And that starts with your making your needs on the bottom. And if you think about the 3 scenarios I gave you, with the gentleman who ignored his own health issues and then died of cancer, the caregiver that's not getting enough sleep, the caregiver that's being heroic and ignoring all their own needs, giving up their job, their home, and everything to be the caregiver, they're not meeting their needs. So if you can grasp this and incorporate this into your thinking about caregiving role, it's going to be much easier to do my next 6, which is the teamwork makes the dream work. So if you need to have a team that helps, again, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And the needs we saw from those 3 busy slides, there's a lot of needs of assistance that your care recipient's going to need. For me, what I would do with some caregivers, I would start off saying, do you have people asking to help you? And they would say, well, yeah, I never know what to tell them or what to tell them to do. And I said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you just make a small list of a few things, like come over and eat lunch with us, or come over and visit with your family member, or take them for a car ride. Just come up with a list of a few things. And the last item on the list, just say anything else that you might think might be helpful, I'm open to. And if someone asks you, you hand them the list and say, no obligation. If you find something you want to do, great. Or if you have other ideas, I'm really open to it. What I found and what caregiver found is usually the person asking would take a look at the list. They would often either find something or have another idea that they'd be willing to do. As a result, what they happen is that they would kind of feel good about it, and not only do the task one time, but do it on an ongoing basis, bring over a meal every week. And the caregiver would find that this worked out really well. The list would get longer. They would put more ideas on it. They found that their stress levels went down, but that also their family member had a more enriched life because more people were involved and doing things with them. So this list idea worked very well. Teamwork makes the dream work. Learning and networking it creates knowledge, which is powerful. If you were going to buy a home tomorrow, you would learn as much as you can about buying homes. You would network about it. The same goes for the caregiving role. You need to learn as much as you can about the dementia condition your loved one has and about the caregiving role. On the top of my list, always in terms of learning, is a few basic communication strategies that can help with the unique features that go on with the Alzheimer's disease. The short-term memory, the repetitive speech, all that can be addressed with a few communication strategies, which will offset potential for arguments and a lot of stress. So learning and starting with communication strategies is really good. View behavior as communication and not as a problem. Another example, I was working with a couple. The gentleman, we'll call him Bill, was living with dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. And his wife and I were meeting and we were talking about kind of how things were going. And this is a couple that had been really into their church, decades and decades into their church, going every Sunday to the services. And during the discussion with her, she said they had stopped going to church a couple weeks earlier because Bill had copped an attitude and would refuse to put on his Sunday clothes to go to church. And I was saying, well, what is the Sunday clothes like? And she goes, well, they're dress pants. And then he has a nice shirt with buttons and a tie. And I said to her, a couple of weeks ago, you mentioned that he was having problems navigating the button and the zipper on his pants in order to use the restroom. And that you figured out that if you had gotten him pants that were like sweatpants with the waisted band, he was able to actually navigate and use the bathroom independent and he wasn't having accidents. Do you think that maybe going to church might be, and putting those pants on may not be something he wants to do? She goes, well, but he has to wear dress pants to church. He just has to, he can't wear sweats. I said, well, let's think through this. You said your church is very open and welcoming. And right now, if he's not going to be willing to put the pants on and he refuses and gives you all this behavior, you're not going to go to church. Will you never go to church again? I said, how about you do this? Why don't you try an experiment? Let him wear his pants with the stretchy belt or the stretchy waistband and the shirt he wants and go to church and see what happens. So she agreed and did that because they really both missed church. In follow up with her, I said, well, how did it go? She goes, oh, it was so good to be back at church. Bill really enjoyed it. We both sat there. He sang the hymns. He was so engaged. He really appreciated the sermon and all the things. And then afterwards, people came up to us and said how much they missed us. They were glad that we were there. I said, oh, wow. And she said, yes. And on the way home, he was singing some of the hymns. When he got home, he just had a really good day. He seemed just really happy all day long. I said, well, what about the sweatpants and the Packer shirt? And because he had insisted that he had to wear a Packer shirt with his sweats, right? She goes, well, no one said anything to me, but we did have people come up to Bill and say, go Pack. And he would raise up his thumb and say, go Pack, and smile. And I said, well, maybe the sweats isn't such a bad idea. And she goes, maybe not. In this scenario, he can't navigate the pants with the zipper and the button, but he can't say that to her. And so his was, I'm not putting them on. He was communicating and she didn't get it. She just viewed his behavior as attitude, and he was creating a problem, not as communication. The fifth one is flexibility is key. As I showed you on those very busy signs, this is a course, this is a journey, and there's going to be declines all the way. What you're seeing today and the assistance you're providing today is probably not going to be the same in a month or a year from now. And so you have to be flexible and go with it. The sixth strategy is don't lose sight of the fact that you're human. You're doing the best you can. You're going to make mistakes. You get one information, you make decisions on it, but you got to let it go. If you make a mistake, you got to just forgive yourself as a human being and move on. The last strategy I have is that you need to appreciate you're providing gifts for the future generations. You're passing on a tradition, just like you do the holidays and favorite recipes and favorite dinners you do. I would run into the heroic caregiver and they would be doing everything they can for their family member. And I said, well, what does your son think about the expectations for him in doing this, or your grandson? And they would look at me, well, what do you mean? They shouldn't do this. This is not this. I would never then expect them to do all this. I said, well, go ask them what they think they should be doing if you need the help. And lo and behold, they always would come back because the next generations would say, we need to do what you're doing. This is what you're teaching us by your actions. And then it would soften the person's perspective on what they need to do. So you're passing on invaluable gifts by your actions. You can say what you want, but they're going to be watching you, and the next generations are going to know that. So my top 7 strategies in terms of what to do to minimize family caregiver burnout. We can't talk about caregiving without really appreciating the very positive pieces of caregiving in that role. So this was a study done in 2014. It's still very relevant today. Caregivers expressed that they really felt a lot of satisfaction for caring for someone who would care for them. They also felt really good about providing excellent care for their loved one. They've experienced personal growth and increase in meaning and purpose in their own life. And that, again, like my last one, they were passing on a tradition to the next generation on the expectation on how family treats family. So the takeaway message, caregiving is about quality of life for both the caregiver and the care receiver. If you can incorporate this concept on this slide, I think the caregiving journey will be more rewarding for most. Here are some of the resources from the materials I referenced and some other potential places people can tap in for information. And I appreciate your time and attention today.
Jody, thank you so much for sharing this important information with us. And I'm sure in your world, you're always talking about this very neglected group. But, in our world, it's like, gosh, who even thought about the care for the caregivers? That's not something we've been trained to think about. It's not messaging you really see a lot. Just as a person who is not necessarily a caregiver for anybody older than I right now. And, you think about raising children and you realize going into that is going to be at least a 20-year commitment, but you don't think about it on the other end that you could have another 20-year commitment on the other side of your life, right? So
Yes.
thanks for bringing that to our attention. And I really loved your concept of put your mask on first. I think that really sums it all up for everybody. So thank you for that. Hello, everybody. Fran Paleo-Moyer, Badger Talks producer. And we're talking to Jody Craner today about caregiver burnout. Please feel free to post any questions in the chat that you have for Jody. And I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up and hearts coming in online here. So thank you for that. And in terms of resources, is it possible for you to go back to that screen, Anthony?
Yes.
Are we able to see that a little bit in any way? Because I think we flashed really quickly to that, and I think it'd be very helpful if people could see some of these links. And the question also is, are there support groups for caregivers around the state? Are you aware of anything like that? Or where would you suggest people make the first step in reaching out for this information?
There are caregiver support groups, and the one of the golden nuggets coming out of the pandemic is their virtual ones, which make them much more accessible for folks all over, especially if you're going to live in an area that's rural that they may not have a lot you can. And so if you were looking for a support group, probably starting with the Alzheimer's Association or the Alzheimer's and Dementia Alliance of Wisconsin, these two right here. Or you can connect with your Aging and Disability Resource Center in your county. Every county in Wisconsin has one, and they will also be able to help you. These three areas, there's no wrong door. If you go to them, they should be able to direct you to one. Now, one of the nice things about the virtual support groups is that we have found that because you could be in Superior attending one maybe down in Racine, right? And for some folks that live in a very small rural community, everybody knows everybody's business. And there's been sometimes a positive when you attend a group that you get to know, but they're not your neighbors. And so you feel like you can share more. So there's been some real positive pieces with the virtual groups, but there are groups that are now meeting back in person again. And so they're very effective. Not everybody is someone who likes a support group, and not all of them are the same. When I be working with caregivers, I say it's kind of like finding a group that is a good fit for you is like kind of going in and buying a pair of shoes. 6 of us might go in with a size 7 to buy a pair of shoes, but we're all walk out with a different type of shoes. I might walk out with tennies, you with pumps, you with boots. So you should not give up on the support group idea until you've given it a couple tries. And the first one you try may not be a good fit for you, so you find one that is. But they're a very good support for caregivers. And then these other 3 resources, the Aging and Disability Resource Center, the Alzheimer's Association, the Alzheimer's and Dementia Alliance of Wisconsin, they have other alternatives that might meet your needs, or other connects with other mentors and peers and such.
That's
no
great.
wrong door. You can start with any of them and they will help you.
Great. It sounds like there's a lot of wonderful resources out there. So thank you for that. Mary Jo Post, thank you for this broadcast, along again with a lot of positive icons coming in out here. So one other question I had for you, as you think about our culture today and how, I mean, at least in the little limited reading that I've done, I've seen that maybe there's less of a trend for the multi-generational living and whatnot. Is that what you're seeing still, where there is less of where people are caring for their own elders in their home? And then the part 2 of that question is, are other countries doing that more so? Are you aware of that? And is there anything we can learn in that regard?
So caregiving, like I said, is passing on traditions. And so in some cultures where family is key, you see the multiple generations living together. And you'll see that mirrored in the United States with some of those populations living here, that they still do it. The Hispanic or Latinx communities are very much so that you'll see multiple generations and they still carry on those traditions, even if they're United States. But we do see people are much more mobile and much more going around. But there are, like with the pandemic, virtual ways and electronic ways to actually provide caregiving from afar. So you can assist someone with their banking and stuff like that. I know in the clinics, when they do the evaluation, a lot of them are now doing the upfront evaluation and then having a second appointment where they're having family from around the United States virtually entering into the follow-up appointment and having a discussion with the patient and the family that's here, but including virtually other family members so they get all on the same page. So there are some unique opportunities that happened with the pandemic and the expansion of us using virtual tools. But yes, you do see that people are spread out. And that's why, touching base with the ADRC, seeing what's available in the community and how to do it, it is very doable. And many people, their goal is to stay within their community, and there are supports and strategies to do that. You just need to understand, what are the resources and how do you put them in time when they're needed.
That's great. And we have a comment from Marie Keith who says, caregivers receive positive, warm fuzzies too. What peace of mind. Very good presenter, especially relating thought-provoking examples. And I will agree highly with that. Thank you so much, Jody, for joining us today and sharing this information with us.
You're very welcome. And everything I've learned is from the caregivers, and I have story after story, just heartwarming, positive impact, and truly appreciate. And for all of you out there doing the caregiving role now, thank you very much. You are making a difference to that person and the generations looking at you and showing that what it's like to be a human and how to care for someone else. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for tuning in. This talk will remain out on the Badger Talks Facebook and YouTube for you to continue to watch and share. So thanks so much. And we'll continue shining light on Alzheimer's and Brain Health Awareness Month. So join us next Tuesday, June 28th at noon. And we're going to be talking with Professor Sterling Johnson. And he's going to be talking about the latest discoveries about Alzheimer's disease made through the Wisconsin Registry for Alzheimer's Prevention. So please tune in and feel free to share your questions there as well. Also tune into the Badger Talks podcast, which you can find on our website at badgertalks.wis.edu. Today, the new episode with Sterling Johnson just released, so please check that out. You can see our upcoming schedule of Badger Talks live events, as well as other hosted talks being hosted by groups all around the state. You can also sign up for our email list. Consider a donation to Badger Talks. We are supported by grant funding. And then you can also search the roster of over 400 UW faculty and staff who have generously signed up to give time to give talks all around the state. So look forward to seeing you next week. And thanks so much for tuning in. Okay, well, I actually, even if we're still recording, there's a couple post questions that came into the chat. Yeah.
Okay, Anthony, that's what it's like to be a caregiver. You've got to be ready for everything.
So if you don't mind, Jody, just giving me a quick response, I can post here. Gosh, I wish these all had come in earlier. Thoughts on strategies to help a caregiver parent get the support they need? Well, we talked about that, so I'm not sure what that's all about. there was another one here. Hold on. Huh. Let me see if I have it here. Someone was asking about funding for caregivers. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah,